Good morning and thank you for joining us. You're listening to Smooth 98.1, Smooth Breakfast with Valentine Ohu.
And Ayo Mairo Ese. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. It's time for us to go into detailed analysis of our newspaper stories. Joining us, we have Tunde Okufi. Good morning, Tunde, at Big Coves on Twitter.
Morning, Valentine. Morning, Ayo.
Good morning, Tunde. And welcome, Cheta, into the studio. Cheta is at CHXTA on Twitter. Good morning, Cheta.
Can't you pronounce it?
Chickster.
Good morning, my neighbors.
Good morning. And good morning to you, Wadi, at Rink, Nigeria. Good morning.
Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Ayo.
Good morning,
Lagos.
Please join the conversation by sending us messages through WhatsApp.
WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. On Twitter, we're at Smooth981FM. Use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. And we're streaming live on YouTube, so join the live stream as well, please.
All right, let's start with our first story from the Punch newspaper for you, Wadi. Nigerians' evacuation begins this Wednesday, according to the authorities. It says South Africans insist that foreigners must leave the country, and there are measures being put in place by the government, both in South Africa, the consulate, and back here in Nigeria, with immigration processes and paperwork. Please take us through the story and why it's taking this long.
This is quite sad, not
What
just the issue of what is going on, of people having to leave countries within Africa. And when you think about it, recently, how many countries signed the trade agreement? And you continue to have those kind of things. How do you want those kind of agreements to work? Once you cannot have proper economic migration, technically, you find out that more and more businesses in Africa would just not go beyond the confines of where they are in that country. However, the government is putting in place or working with the consulate in South Africa. They say about 400 Nigerians in South Africa are ready to come home. There was some rallies over the weekend where one person was killed and 5 others injured.
That's no longer a rally.
Well, it was a march. Another thing that is of significance here is the fact that Nigerians are also attacking so-called South African companies. They are Nigerian companies because they employ Nigerians. In these times of economic downturn, once you start to attack those companies, there's a possibility that they could leave the country and more people will lose their jobs. So it's quite it's quite annoying that we're continually seeing this kind of things. Over the weekend, there were some videos circulating of how the Ghanaians, Togolese, and quite a number of people were sent out of Nigeria in the 80s. In Ghana did the same thing in the 60s.
Afterwards? What happened to us afterwards?
So it's been said in this report that most of the areas where the violent clashes are mostly encountered or experienced are around where you have the Zulu dwellers, Zulu settlements. That yes, go on.
Valentine, it's not about ethnicity. It's about means. So it's poverty, right? And it's a failing system. Many neglect to realize that South Africa is a socialist state, so they're like the UK, dependent on. If you're out of work, the government should provide a stipend. There's free quality education, at least compared to ours. There's free healthcare. Now, when that starts to fail and the government can no longer provide, populist politics says it is that guy who is foreign that is the reason, right? Not necessarily that the country isn't earning as well as the country used to earn and can't support the things that it used to support. I mean, South Africa in many ways is no different from Nigeria, but with first world, not just aspirations, but a first world impression of itself. Now that's an unfortunate situation they find themselves in. They can't sustain it. And then you look at the disparity between
the haves and have-nots.
It's widening. So it's very easy to then feel that it is the foreigners. We did it when we said Ghana must go. You get, and we're not a socialist state, right? We're not expecting anything from the government the way the South Africans do.
Thank you very much, Wadi and Tunde. Let's go to this next story now. This time around from the Daily Times. Certificate Saga The PDP has reacted to Minister of Information Lai Mohammed's plea for Nigerians to pardon the president, and he's come up. The PDP have actually said that he should step down. Really, he should toe the path of honor and step down. Tunde, your thoughts on this story?
Opposition party.
So yeah, my thoughts precisely are. I mean, so I realized and I learned that the video is very old. The evidence that they're pointing to is in excess of 4 years old. So again, that's taking a cue from Cheta's comment. That it's incompetent. It's incompetent opposition. What have they been doing? What happened during the lead up to the last election cycle, electioneering? What about them trying to make it a case that PMB shouldn't be on the ballot sheets, right? What about, even if you could say you had the establishment working against you, what about constantly pushing out that message, campaigning, during what happens to your electioneering, really and truly? I mean, the way PDP goes about their position, it almost feels like a scam in and of itself. Like, it's so incompetent and so incoherent. You wonder that, look, really, what's the point? If I had to take a punt, right, which is a guess, on the outcome of this tribunal, I would say that the tribunal will not make a determination for the duration of PMB's the remainder of his tenure.
For me, this particular thing, it just shows this video has been in existence for 5 years now, or almost 5 years. And the time Lai Mohammed first made that statement was when PDP was in power. Now, it wasn't until this weekend when this video surfaced on social media and people began to ask questions that PDP picked up on it. What it tells me is that they don't do research either.
They're not.
How can you are supposed to be opposition and you have no ability to oppose the government? Then what do you exist for?
Cheta, there comes the scam, which is some people. I kid you not, I'm sure there are people that are responsible for research. There are people who are supposed to.
Of course, they are.
But they're not doing.
They
anything.
have it.
But the money is
The
going
money
around.
has gone.
PDP has
Going
a research
around.
directorate.
The money is going around.
Also, there's an allegation within the story, almost signaling that it's the video was put up by the APC, by the presidency, especially.
For sympathy and.
So it just
honestly,
it makes you question the veracity of that. But
let's take some comments on certificate saga. Solomon from Akoka says, how the officers of this administration speak at cross purposes baffles me. Kiari said he collected the certificate like he declared PNB can't find it. Why can't they just agree to stick to a particular story to sell to us and defend it? And then Vincent from Adeba says, in my opinion, Nigerians in South Africa should come back home as long as their security and safety are not guaranteed in South Africa. Our government should create jobs for our citizens. And then we have Ace from Ago who says, we should learn from the South African experience. Let me ask, what did we benefit from Liberia where our soldiers fought for peace? Or in Congo where our health workers fought Ebola? Or even Gambia where we averted an impending post-election crisis? Nothing. I won't be surprised if these countries maltreat us tomorrow. Let's note that USA doesn't help for free. Though a rich country. Good morning.
That's why they're rich.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to talk about the state of the nation now. This story from Vanguard newspaper reads, politicians feel religious crisis in Nigeria. It's a claim or an accusation by the Sultan of Sokoto, Alhaji Saad Abubakar. He made this yesterday, lampooning or attacking politicians in the country and accusing them of fueling religious unrest across Nigeria. Cheta, your thoughts on this story, please?
I once met His Eminence, the Sultan of Sokoto, in DC, and I asked him a question. Why is it that you never make these statements from home? If you look at this, he made this statement while he was being hosted by the Deji of Akure. Now, he's right in parts. Politicians fuel religious crisis, they fuel ethnic crisis. Nigeria is at its most divided right now, certainly in my lifetime. And it's politicians that have been fueling it so that they fuel it so that they will benefit. Basically, it's divide and rule on steroids. However, there's something that His Eminence is missing here, which is the role of his constituency, the traditional rulers, in aiding the politicians by not speaking up when it starts. When the politician starts, for example, not him, he wasn't on the throne then, but his predecessor should have spoken up when Sani Yerima introduced Sharia in neighboring Zamfara states, which is squarely under his domain. Because Sharia was introduced not as a as a tool to benefit the people, but to others. And I mean, it's almost 20 years since that happened now. We've seen the results. So we have gone down a rabbit hole. We've polarized ourselves along ethno-religious lines, and you expect that suddenly things will just get better. It doesn't work like that. Now, traditional rulers in Nigeria used to hold a lot of moral authority. They had the opportunity to prevent all of this from happening. So this is essentially the horse has bolted, because now there's a survey that we did for a client. I'm not permitted to say which client it is. I'm not permitted to say give the full details. But one thing that came out is that of all Nigeria's 36 states, it's only in 2, both of them in the south, that the traditional rulers in their domain still hold very much authority. In other parts of the country, the vast majority of the country, traditional rulers have been steadily losing authority. And it explains why, for example, back in the day, if you had things like this banditry menace that you're having, again in the Sultan's domain, back then, he would have been the one that they would have called. Now we are seeing rather embarrassing pictures of governors going into the bush to meet with bandits. So that is one problem. He needs to learn to look in the mirror. He's speaking up a little too late.
But what would be the major reason, in your own view or opinion, for the loss of power, so to speak, over the years?
Simple, they didn't speak up on time. So people looked for other power centers.
And also deliberate undermining by governments, the military. To be honest, I mean, in any authoritarian regime, the leader must have ultimate power. So deliberately, I mean, they need to take staff of office from the governor. They're paid by the governors. You know, all of these things deliberately on the mind. It gives them the opportunity to pick and choose. So when it then creates opportunity where uncredible people who are undeserving get to these positions, and clearly that affects their authority, because they're not wanted by the government in some instances.
Which means we have to go back to the beginning, because again, the traditional rulers actually colluded with the military establishments back in the 60s, as far back as then, to basically undermine
the institutions.
So,
thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on now to talk about some other issues around security. This time around, a report from Premium Times has it that police confirm 8 killed in Ebonyi attack. A gruesome murder. Some people lost their heads, literally. The village that was attacked, actually, they said on Sunday, they confirmed the death of 8 persons in Okwagba, Ngbo, or Haku local government areas of the Ebonyi state. Please take us through this story, Tunde.
Yeah, it's disheartening, to be honest. It really is disheartening. It's become almost a staple in in the Nigerian news cycle. If not every, at least weekly, something like this happens, and many of it, and a lot of it goes unreported. Like Cheta mentioned, where I'm most divided. Nobody wants to sound alarmist, but it's true. At least in my lifetime, I can't remember when, Nigeria felt so unsafe for its inhabitants, and it's unfortunate. We really need to look for answers. If you look at this now, it's unclear, right? At least there are 2 views as to whether these attacks were internal to Ebonyi State or they came from Benue. The 2 perspectives are given. Some people say they were from Benue. Others say no, that they were internal to Ebonyi. That one points to the lack of policing and resourcing, not even being able to trace where these individuals have come or have originated from. Let's hope that maybe over the coming days they will. If you also look at it, there's a psychology to killing, so to say. The fact that certain individuals were beheaded, right, to me points to, if you look at when you talk to the psychologists, it points to, it's very personal, and they're trying to leave a message. So to me, it doesn't indicate random far off bandits who have come to steal and for robbery. This is very personal. So it might lend its credence to the idea that these people are from within the area. And it's some sort of, it's organized crime.
And also a personal.
And it's also a personal thing. Finally, I'd like to touch on, with all this, insecurity that's going on, each of the governors, each of the state governors, not the word governors, not states. Yeah, I didn't say each of the states. Each of the governors spend about $580 million yearly, right? That's over 200 billion naira on security votes, right? Specifically for issues like this. yet they persist,
Huge
and we
question,
can't
right?
audit it.
All right, thank you very
Interesting
much.
points. Thank
Comrade
you, Tunde.
Henry on WhatsApp is saying, still reacting to the certificate saga. If Mr. President failed to attach his certificate as required by law in his nomination form he submitted to INEC, he should toe the line of the former Minister of Justice, who also forgot to fill his asset declaration form.
All right, Samuel from Lekki says, I agree with you, Cheta. The reason traditional rulers have lost respect is because they didn't act when expected. And this is why IPOB has found respect among many southeastern people, especially in diaspora. So you guys should take them serious rather than laugh over issues relating to them. Life abhors vacuum.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to our next story. Wade, I'll come to you for this one. Nigerian government spends 1.8 billion naira on prevention, treatment of malnutrition in 18 states. This report is from the Premium Times, and it details how much was disbursed by the Federal Ministry of Health in the course of 1 year, 2017 and 2018.
2 years.
In 2 years, so 2017 and 2018. What was disbursed between 2017 and 2018? That's 1 year. And then 1.8 billion naira disbursed as well. So can you please take us through the story and detail how they're tackling the
Well,
malnutrition?
this is we need to hear more of this.
Okay.
Why? Because if government is actually spending, but also they're partnering with UNICEF, but if they're spending to prevent malnutrition, that's great for Nigeria. In 2017, 600 million was their counterparty funding, and in 2018 it was 1.2 billion. So in 2 years they put down about 1.8 billion for 18 states. Some of the states are not willing to participate. They started with 5 states: Anambra, Bayelsa, Edo, Osun, about 5 states and the Federal Capital Territory. We need to do more and more of this and work with donor organizations to continue to eradicate or prevent malnutrition across the country. Poverty is rife all over. So
But the question is though, they've spent, this is a whopping 1.8 billion naira. I know it's just scratching the surface when we consider the amount of money required to tackle malnutrition in Nigeria. However, are we feeling the impact of this money?
I was going there.
Okay.
But what's the impact? We don't even know how many people were fed or how many people were looked after. You just said 12,000 cartons of what's it called? Ready to use therapeutic food had been shared in 5 states. Who did it touch? So there should be more transparency. That's why I said we need to hear more of this. We need to tell the whole world that what we're trying to do to combat malnutrition. So more should be done. Government along with UNICEF should provide more statistics about these things so that we can continually see how are we improving or we're just spending money and it's just the same set of people that it's going to. So really, but this is good news to hear in Nigeria.
All right, thank you very much. It's good news, but like we say, we can put out a report like this, but it's more important to understand the impact assessment, also have monitoring and evaluation in place. Thank you very much. Tunde, let me come to you for the next one. 3 governors and their Nigerian counterpart adopt unified approach to tackle insurgency. So I think Cheta referred to this or touched on this a little bit during his earlier analysis about Governor Aminu Bello Masari of Katsina State, his counterparts from Sokoto, Aminu Waziri Tambuwal, and Dr. Mohammed Bello Matawale of Zamfara, along with their Maradi Niger Republic counterpart Alhaji Zakari Umaru, have expressed concerns over the proliferation of arms, ammunition, and hard drugs in the 2 countries. So they signed an agreement and they've reached some sort of unified approach to tackle insurgency. Can you please take us through the story?
Okay. Well, it doesn't. I don't really see the part where it says they signed. They publish a communique, which is, so I guess.
The written agreement.
Yes, an agreement, but I mean not like binding contracts. And this is what we're committing in terms of funds and stuff of that nature. Which is, and I mention that because I think it's and I'll get to why I feel it's important. But let me start off with saying that talking is good. Right. In this instance, it's not just across states, but it's across nations and the individual states. So perhaps, being that they're closer to the situation, they'll be able to find, unique solutions they'll be able to find unique solutions for their, and creative solutions for their problems. My concern, however, or my worry, obviously, is that I don't want this to stop at a talk shop.
Yes.
Right. It's very light on detail, which is why I pointed out that they haven't actually signed anything. Right. They've discussed. Let's hope that they do carry it further. There are many things that are riding on this, and they actually have the means. I mean, consider the amounts that I mentioned earlier that they get to spend on the security votes.
Yes.
Look, the fact that they're talking is good, that they're looking for solutions. Let's hope it's not just token service. Just like you want to say something.
Yeah, the thing is that these three states are contiguous with the Maranai department of Niger, and a lot of the bandits actually, because they are essentially the same people, culturally, ethnically, they speak the same language. So many of there are two cities or two communities around Maradi that these guys essentially disappear into and reappear back, Agwe and Madarunfa. So the question is, what are we doing? Because the problems that cause all of these things are the same across the border. I think we need to start coming to terms with the fact that a lot of our borders are artificial, so in reality don't exist. And once we come to terms with that and then begin to know what to do about that, then we will we'll have a situation. I mean, at Jibia, which also borders Agwe, the border is essentially just a pole. I mean, come on.
All right, thank you very much. I'm just looking at another report, and that's why I saw the headline reads signed MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, saying that it said that they were going to uphold the renewed effort. Was actually on the insistence of the their Niger counterparts who called the meeting.
Olatunde Alao on YouTube says traditional rulers have been losing respect even before independence. When late Chief Awolowo deposed the former Alafin of Oyo, and post-independence when the late Sodana deposed the former Emir of Kano.
Politicians.
All right, thank you. Cheta, let me come to you. Border closure crashes prices of petrol, diesel. Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company Limited, Mr. Bismarck Rani, disclosed that following the closure of the border, petrol now sells for 144 naira per litre, showing that the closure has blocked smuggling of petrol to the neighboring countries. Now, we've taken these two stories at different times during Freshly Pressed. One, the closure of the border without notice and complaints from people trying to cross borders. And then two, the smuggling of petroleum via these borders and trying to control this and how it affects price and subsidy payment. Please, can you tell us what the report by Rani speaks of?
The report is essentially in short, I'm disappointed in Thisday for running such a report. I think that the respected Bismarck is angling for something. There is no difference between 845 naira per barrel per liter and 144 in reality. I mean, 1 naira has absolutely no value. Having said that, the incentive to smuggle is still there. We still have the under recovery, whatever it is. And what I would have expected Thisday to do, instead of being very lazy, is that they should have picked up the phone and called someone in Cotonou. And what they would have found out is that the official price of petrol per liter in Cotonou is still 577 CFA per liter, which converts to 351. Now, what used to happen was that Nigerian petrol will make its way across the border and sell there for about the equivalent of 160 naira. Now it's the equivalent of about 210. But that is still 151 naira cheaper than
what they usually
than the official. So if you ever take a drive from across the border all the way into Cotonou, as far as Lomé, you'll find that petrol stations are typically empty. And then you'll see these boys selling kegs, sometimes even close to petrol stations. You know almost immediately that this petrol came from Nigeria. Why? Because we have this thing called subsidy. We are subsidizing petrol for the entire sub-region. Petrol in Nigeria costs less than half of what it costs in all of our neighboring countries. And in short, about half of what it costs in, say, Liberia and Sierra Leone. So, and those are the next two cheapest to Nigeria. So, then if you look at it, all of our petrol numbers, we suddenly jumped from 30 million liters consumption per day in less than 2 years, within a 2-year period to double that. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how much borders you close. The truth is, there's an economic incentive to smuggle. People will find ways to do it, and they are. Now, all of this praise of this harebrained arbitrary closure of the border is something that is not even taking into account another effect. The price of a kilo of turkey has gone up 13% in the last few weeks because a lot of turkey comes from there. The price of rice has gone up. It's just that we are still tabulating, but it's about that between 10 and 15% range. So we are hurting ourselves in other ways because we want, and then don't forget the fact that we signed an African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and then somebody closed the border arbitrarily. What is the effect of all of that on perception of how things run in Nigeria?
Thank you very much, Cheta. Wade, you're going to say something.
You know, when we talk about border closure, it's amazing in today's world that people wake up in the morning and just close the borders.
1984.
Just put in place the right things. People would go through and you will do the right things. So it's really important. So like Cheta said, somebody wakes up in the morning and then close the border. Your African Free Trade Agreement that you signed, things cannot go and pass the way they are supposed to be. So let's just do the right things.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, we have 2 stories left, but I'll take this one. They're both on travel, one on road and one on air travel. But the first, let's take this one, Cheta, I'll stay with you. Buhari makes 52 foreign trips in 51 months. I'll just leave the headline for you to take us through the story. Please go ahead.
Those extra codes will not pay, will not collect themselves all day. Anyway, Daily Times is telling us that President Buhari has embarked on 52 foreign trips since May 2015 and has ended up spending approximately 4 billion naira in the process. He has visited 30 countries across 4 continents. I mean,
Please, how much have we made in FDI?
Yes, I was going to say that.
stop entering my head.
Okay, quickly.
Well,
Spill
go
us
on,
what's in
Cheta.
your head. Sorry.
That was all in your head.
In Q1, we got only $220 million in FDI, down from 1.93 billion in Q1 2018. And so these are things that the NBS reports that came out last week showed that it even dropped in Q2. Q2, where because of election spending and all of that, it's supposed to have jump. It went down. See, the problem is that as a people, we are not introspective. Why is everyone deserting us? Despite our much vaunted large population, people are deserting us because of things like arbitrary closure of borders. Policy signal is not right. People are deserting us because the chairman of our ruling party came up and just said, almost without any challenge, we should nationalize a foreign company.
All right.
Investors see these things and they freak out. They're like, so you want me to go and pack my money in that place? Mbano.
The presidency makes statements around what the central bank
should be doing. You understand? So these are things that I'm sorry, this and he
your thoughts.
These are things that we need to have congruent policy positions. Once we have congruent, the things that businesses hate the most is uncertainty.
All right.
Shola says, let's look at the bright side, and Buhari can be a travel blogger.
I think people should read this report.
Goodness.
It's actually quite detailed.
That's a
That
good
talks
one.
about his local travels as well, just maps it in Nigeria. I'll go on to our final story, Wade. 2 states to toll Lagos-Abeokuta, Epe-Ijebu-Ode, Ikorodu-Sagamu roads from the Guardian newspaper very quickly.
They just want to raise, they've taken it over from the federal government in the hope that with private sector participation, they'll be able to raise additional funds. Has the governor of Ogun State, has he appointed his commissioners yet?
No.
That's one. He's sitting there in an investiture of Grand Prix or honorary patron of Abeokuta Club and telling us that they want to take over 3 roads and they want to put toll on it. What is the essence of governance if we are not ensuring that put the right tax systems in place and apply it to where it's supposed to go.
Count to. How many are we? But the key thing is, these stories like this tell us what the real issue is. Nigeria is in a fiscal crisis. Money no day. So they are looking for all sorts of ways to raise money. End of story.
Right, so much debt. Ace from Agos says, it's so funny, gentlemen, how this government acts. So the summer border where economic activities happen is closed without warning, while those borders where headsmen, bandits, whatever they're called these days, are not even being manned, even though lives are lost. Questions there. I'll go through most of your messages. We thank you so much for staying tuned to Smooth 98.1. Thank you. Special thanks to Analysts, Cheta at Cheta, Tunde Okufi at Big Coops on Twitter, Wade at Re-Ink Nigeria. Special thanks to all of you for being part of Freshly Pressed today. Next, we talk sports, looking at the US Open, the men and women's singles and the victories. Stay with us on Smooth 98.1.
The headlines.
I did stay up late yesterday.
Commissioners is going to do that governor. He has appointed commissioner is going to do honorary victory.
So the story on the 8 in Ebonyi.
Yeah.
So what has been happening is that the communities are, there's a point near Gakem where Benue, Cross River, and Ebonyi actually meets. There has been an intestinal crisis there. Those communities historically are about the same, and they've been having a land dispute for about 30 years now.
So it's like Nigeria's Balkans.
Yes,
that kind of thing. So
they are fighting.
So no, at the end of the day, all of this is because of the failure of Nigeria. So in short, let me show you something. You've heard of the EEC, Eastern Economic Corridor. It's till today, it still has